Much indeed. And the first thing I'll say is how great it is to be back at the Things Conference again. The 10th year, every year that I've come, it's got bigger. Every year there are more solutions. Every year there are more real customers walking around trying to find things that solve their business problems. It almost makes up for the fact that it's coincided with my wedding anniversary for the last 10 years. So I always have an apology to make to my wife after these events, but it's worth it. So today, as Olivier said, what I'm going to talk about is there's a lot of hype around AI at the moment. There's a lot of hype around the fact that AI can enable us to move into a more autonomous world. There are many things that we can learn from the past that will help us capitalize on that opportunity and really not repeat the mistakes from the past. So I'm going to start by saying, over the last 2 decades, we have really gone from asking how do we connect a device, and a decade ago even, there was still some confusion over which network technology, and most of the non-cellular ones were fairly young and therefore difficult to use, and most of the newer ones like LoRaWAN were still very much in a nascent phase. But we've gone from that to assuming that every machine and every sensor is connected, is online by default. And today, as a result, billions of devices are connected to the internet, and they stream trillions of data points. And yet, despite that scale, many IoT systems today are still really glorified telemetry pipelines, collecting, visualizing, reporting, not acting. And we really do stand today at a bit of a crossroads, I think. Will the IoT stay as a data fire hose? Or are we going to be able to harness the promise of AI to transform connected things into autonomous, intelligent systems? And the answer to that question, I think, is really going to be shaped by 3 forces: interoperability, human-centered design, and the responsible use of AI. IoT connectivity was never really the finish line. I mean, we've spent much of the last 2 decades, and certainly myself, figuring out how to just connect things. But that was never the finish line. The simple act of having access to data doesn't solve the business problems that our customers have. If anything, it just gives them another business problem: what to do with the data that has been generated. We connected assets, vehicles, machines, wearables, and we developed a whole bunch of different protocols. We had LoRaWAN, we had Sigfox, NB-IoT, Cat-M, RedCap, and we fought amongst ourselves about which technology or platform was the best. We tried to lock customers in as some kind of failed market grab that somehow predicated by the 50 billions of devices that were forecast and the VC money that went into the companies that built those companies. Those VCs were sold a story that, well, we're going to go and capture 10 billion of these, 20 billion of these. The numbers were ridiculous and, not surprisingly, didn't come to fruition. And we locked data into silos, into proprietary APIs, or vertical specific solutions. And we got locked into an echo chamber of our own making. And we failed, I think, to recognize the real barrier to adoption that has held back IoT, all this time. And that's quite simple. It was the need to listen to and understand what customers actually want, to figure out what business problem they were trying to solve and how they were trying to solve it. And what they really wanted was a simple way to deliver insights, to deliver value from that connectivity and value from the data stream without all of the complexity that we, I think, as the broader ecosystem of IoT outside of these walls and inside of these walls, inadvertently created. And I would argue that if we're going to see the IoT graduate from merely a telemetry pipeline into autonomous systems, interoperability has to be a first-class citizen. I think I've stood on this stage every single year that I've been here and said more or less the same thing. And I think we're starting to get there, and there are many factors that held us back, one of which was actually not seeing enterprise adoption and not seeing revenue flow to providers. And when the revenue started flowing, things started to get a lot easier. And we've started to create commercial models that actually reward cooperation rather than competition. And again, I address this not only to the LoRaWAN ecosystem, but more broadly. People have started to figure out what they're good at and what they're not good at, and they've started to figure out how to partner with people who are good at the things that they lack. And in the LoRaWAN ecosystem, frankly, we've been lucky enough to have the Things Network and the Things industry really forging that path. While I've stood on this stage and said the same thing, Vinka and Johan have stood on this stage for 10 years and delivered the same message. We need to work together as an ecosystem. Our customers don't want to bet on a small provider of an all-inclusive solution that solves their business problem, because the risk inherent in that, in something that's going to be deployed for 15 years, was so great that it meant that customers thought, you know what, we're going to stand back, we're going to wait until these guys figure it out, and then we're going to enter the market. And I think in the last 2 to 3 years, you've started to see that happen. It's just beginning, and there's lots more to do, but at least we've kind of turned that corner. But the biggest failure of IoT actually isn't technical, I don't think. I think it's human. We've designed dashboards that no one really reads. We've delivered alerts that no one acts on. And we've delivered data lakes that no one drinks from. The promise of autonomy isn't to cut people out. It's to make humans better. And I think that design principle is something that is critical to us as we go into this next phase, so that we don't fall back into the same model that we were in before with AI, that my AI is better than your AI, and I'm going to capture all the market, and it's going to be that we carry forward what we've learned over these last years into this next phase of the internet. Because if we don't, it's going to take a lot longer, and it's going to cost us all a lot more money to get to the point where we can actually deliver value to our customers. And ultimately, it's going to be another 10 years before we see the promise of AI really come to fruition. Think about it. I mean, if you look at industrial IoT, an AI-assisted system now can predict a machine failure, and it can automatically reroute production. But the impact is when the system explains why in a way that the human operator understands and can act on. We have assumed, as an industry, I would argue, that our customer is a software developer or maybe a hardware developer. In the industrial and enterprise space, that's not the customer. It's the person who's standing on the factory floor watching the conveyor belt take parts by. And if we don't design systems with that end customer in mind, again, we're locked into this phase of non-adoption. The question I would ask is, what happens, though, if we automate without empathy? You get systems that can optimize KPIs while creating friction and burnout and even unsafe conditions for workers, for people on the ground. And human-centered design, it's not just UX fluff. It's not make it pretty so that people it's actually something that I believe is really integral to the process of designing an effective system that actually works. And in many ways, it's the safeguard against the unintended consequences that AI carries the risk of. I think AI is the catalyst, as Olivier said at the start. It really is the catalyst that takes us from that connected world to a world where we have intelligent systems able to do pattern recognition, anomaly detection, generative agents that are being deployed today at the edge. And there are really 3 stages in AI. The first is assistive. That's just systems that kind of surface insights. And there is augmented, systems that recommend actions, recommend outcomes. And then there is autonomous, systems that act on behalf of humans with oversight from humans. And the leap from augmentation to autonomy is not technical. While it is enabled by AI, the adoption of those systems is going to be driven by cultural and ethical concerns. And ethical concerns come up around AI as a whole, and I think that is no less true in the space of AI. Do we trust machines to decide when to shut down a turbine, reroute an ambulance, or approve a financial transaction? And now IoT developers today are kind of AI developers by proxy as we step into this space. And whether you're coding firmware or designing APIs or deploying edge nodes, you are making decisions that determine how much agency machines will hold in our world. And that is a cultural decision, an ethical decision, not a technical one. And it requires that we develop an even deeper understanding of what our customers are actually trying to do with these technologies. Imagine a logistics system where you have trucks and pallets and ports that negotiate routing autonomously, but with human-defined guardrails around cost, carbon, customer SLAs, or a smart city where traffic lights, EVs, and drones coordinate seamlessly, but where human oversight ensures fairness and ensures safety. The future of IoT is not about more devices. It's about systems that reason, systems that collaborate, and systems that adapt. And while being interoperable is really across networks, centered on human values, is non-negotiable. So the interoperability that we have learned to adopt over these last 10 years is critical as we move into this next phase. It's critical that we do not forget the hard lessons that many of us in this room have experienced directly over these last years. We're entering a decade where complexity and a lack of interoperability will continue to slow the adoption of IoT. A patchwork of siloed dashboards, of dumb devices, or it will become an invisible infrastructure that kind of exists behind us, quietly powering the next generation of autonomous intelligent systems. It will become the data feed that in many respects IoT was always intended to be, to feed into the wider decision-making models that enterprises are increasingly using to improve their operations. But this future depends on the choices that we make right now, as developers, as solution providers, as insiders. Do we choose short-term lock-in? Do we take that VC money and claim that we're going to own a market? Or do we embrace open standards that actually enable us to scale? Do we design for convenience or for humans and the societies that they live in? Do we hand over agency to machines without thought, or do we embed responsibility, ethics, and oversight into every line of code and every deployed solution? This, I think, is our inflection point. We've had several over the course of the last couple of decades, but the next wave of IoT is not about connecting more things. It's about building systems that can think, adapt, and earn our trust. And the opportunity in front of us is enormous. It's probably not 50 billion, just to break that myth, but it's enormous. To shape an IoT that doesn't just move data, but moves industries, cities, and human lives forward. But if the IoT is truly to come of age, and we are on the cusp of that, I think, it is critical that we learn from the lessons of the past, that we work together as an ecosystem to embed the core principles of interoperability, human-centered design, and the responsible use of AI, that we avoid regressing into the mentality of my technology is better than yours, my solution delivers the whole problem. That frankly, and the bullshit that we believed for so many years, if we carry on with that, we're going to be here in another 10 years' time talking about, well, why didn't AI create the uplift in our IoT deployments? Why did it not work? If we focus on what customers actually want, and most of all, to steal Vinka and Johan's favorite phrase, if we work as an ecosystem to build this together, we will be successful. Thank you.